So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes wrapping up all of that wonderful work that we did on Saturday. So when we arrived in the morning, we had two different sessions. One was with Vicky and the other one was with Sarah and Joe. Now, one of the key takeaways I got from Vicky's session in the morning is thinking about big rhythmic cycles. So for example, the sun rises and the sun sets every day. We have the seasons which return every year. We have weeks and we have days, and then within each day we have our own rhythm and routine. So this is a really important thing for us to be thinking about because those rhythms are comforting, they provide us with a sense of security, and also we can anticipate what is coming next. None of us really worry about whether the sun is going to come up tomorrow because we are so familiar with this. Then we were introduced to the wonderful ideas of Emmy Pickler and how important it is to see children as both capable and competent, but also having all the necessary skills at their development level to self-initiate and to be responsible for their own movements and actions. We learnt this through three key setups. We were thinking about nappy changes, we were thinking about dressing the child, and we also had that washing hands exercise. The things which really stood out to me from that was that we asked the child, we allowed time for the child to respond, and then we looked for the little micro gestures and those little moments of recognition where the child is working towards cooperation. And that way, as an educator, we are not doing it for them, but we are allowing the child to participate in doing it with them. Wasn't it an amazing experience to explore movement with Sarah and Joe? Some of the key takeaways I took from that was how important it is to recognise that there is always a movement cycle. We're either moving towards activation or we're moving towards settling. And when we understand that cycle, we can then think about what are we trying to achieve. So we can help children to settle by, for example, getting them to chase a little rabbit on the end of a string back to a cubby house where they sit and they hide. Or we can activate children by making them become dragons where they run and they scream. So when we understand that we are always in a movement cycle, we're either moving towards activation or towards settling, and we see each of the children in that, we can start thinking creatively about how we transition children from inside to outside, or from the sandpit to sleeping, or to washing hands, or to sitting at the table to have lunch. So if we understand activate and settle, that's going to give us a massive advantage when we're thinking about how do we transition our children through the day. So to do this, first we brainstormed about all the chores that you are doing every day, from signing in sheet to talking to parents, preparing food, checking your phone calls and emails and getting back to people, all that communication, packing lunch, dishes, bags, cleaning, pack up. It's a lot to do, and we had to then arrange that in terms of the day. So we might arrive the morning, the middle of the morning, the afternoon, and the pickup. That is an insane amount of work and a huge responsibility for all of you to be thinking about. So we then started to think about, well, what are some of the emotions that the children are experiencing throughout the day? And when we started thinking about it, we've got prayer time, we've got love, we've got anxiety and worries, and we've got excited and calm. So there's a bit of a mixed bag happening at arrival time, right? And in the morning, there's adventurous, excited, happy, sad, sometimes hungry and unregulated happens around the middle of the day. And then we move into sleepy and tired, sometimes grumpy or hangry. And then as we move towards to pick up, we can have curious and shy, we can have crying, we can also have activated. Children, when they wake up after their afternoon nap, are often a bit anxious too about where they are. So what you need to do is think about how all of these emotions fit into your day and how you can make this a very personal representation, because all of us are going to be doing this differently. Then we started to think about, well, what activities do you like to do each day? Again, activities for the morning, arrivals, for mid-morning, for middle of the day, afternoon, and pickup. But it gets more complicated at this end of the game, because we're looking at things like, well, if we've got breakfast in the morning, how do we do that while the parents are signing in some of these chores that we're trying to get done? And also, when we're dealing with heightened emotions like anxiety or overactivation through excitement. So when we thought about activities, we had to arrange them in terms of open-ended stuff in the morning, thinking about more activated things outdoorsy, mid-morning before the sun gets too hot, and then we're thinking about how do we settle for lunch and then for afternoon nap, and then also what do we do with all of those emotions at the end of the day. So the activities that we have planned are really important to align them with our emotions and also the chores of the day. And last but not least, and this is kind of, I feel, where the meat of the day is we're thinking about transition. So we've got these amazing insights that we got from Vicky and from Sarah and from Joe around how we might invite children into play, and then how we might create a story where the child is swept up and transitions from one moment to the next without necessarily having to be given too much choice and without necessarily having to think too much about where they're going. And so some of these tools that we have in our transition tool belt are song, group movement, hand washing was one of the things we talked, breath, so breathing in and breathing out, how we enter a play space, how we explore that space, how we settle in that space, and also the art of redirection. So how do we redirect play without necessarily jumping in and saying, no, stop, you can't do that, that's not right. So how do we then think about redirecting that play into something that is more productive? So I think there's quite a lot of work for us all to do when we start thinking about how do we make our days more joyous and harmonious. And I think, you could start with this. You could do use tape on your wall, and you could use little sticky notes, and thinking about where your different chores sit in your day, your emotions, your activities, and then come up with some transition. So I would really love you to share some of the transition activities you have. For example, when somebody arrives in the morning, how do you transition them into your service so that they can arrive and they can feel confident, knowing that there's going to be all this kind of anxiety around who might be there and how they might play. So some of the really important moments that happen through the rhythm of the day we call golden moments. And so we were encouraged to think about these golden moments, and we all experienced something like hand washing. So making the water warm, adding a scent like rose, and just thinking about how that could be calming and relaxing, and then taking the time to gently wash hands with a face washer and to allow the child to do it themselves and to do it on their terms. So we start to see how these kind of chores, hand washing as an example, or we could do wiping bottoms, doing nappies, or setting the table. How can we involve the child? How can we ask them to cooperate and then enable them to lead and to step into that play or that moment? So self-initiate and then think about what comes next.